meeting is being recorded.
Can you guys hear me?
I can see you now.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in and joining us today, guys, on a little bit of a different SecTalks. So welcome to the first live stream SecTalks Toowoomba. I'm good to see. I'm glad to see that we've got a big crowd on the list today, and hopefully it all works out and you can kind of follow along and hear us okay. Playing with the technology. So today our topic is like most things, focused around coronavirus, what that means to cybersecurity and the future. So this was a pretty interesting thing to write out. I'd originally kind of thought that there would be a prediction type episode of SecTalks. And as I started writing these predictions, some of them ended up actually being true, which is pretty interesting. So I think everybody knows who I am. My name's JP, SecTalks Toowoomba founder. I've got a bunch of certifications and a bunch of different stuff. Put a bit of a blurb there just to change it up a bit, but you know, you get the idea. That's me doing some stuff. So housekeeping, don't go into the branch. Hang on a minute. We got some new housekeeping rules. So because we're virtual, we've got some different rules here. If you can mute your microphone when you're not speaking, it'll just make it easier for everybody else to play along and hear what I'm saying. If you have any questions as we go through, you can drop them in the chat room. Dan's going to moderate that, and also got it up on the side here. So if you do pop anything in there, we should be able to go through and see those, and we can answer those. There is a feature as well where you can raise your hand, and you should see like a little circle with a hand in it next to your name in the participant list, and you can raise your hand, and that lets Dan know that you have a question, and then he can prompt me around that. If you're having issues with breaking up or the audio quality is not good, one thing to try is to turn off your video if you are streaming your video back to us, which I don't think anybody's doing at the moment. And generally, you'll get better sound if you have headphones to listen to, and it'll just help balance out any echoes if you are talking as well. Which is one of the reasons I got these great things on. It wasn't just to look good on the film. So just remember, anything that we do talk about in these sessions is for research training purposes, and only do we have permission to do so. So why did I decide on this talk this month? Well, malicious actors are already taking advantage of the pandemic. There's organisations that are changing how they work at a very rapid pace at the moment, and as we're seeing infection rates in people increasing through countries, we can see that the target attacks are kind of increasing as well, and Italy is a really good example of that. There's some really targeted stuff for them, and you know, we can influence this change in a positive way, and hopefully end up with a secure outcome and something that helps the organisations for which we work, our friends and our family. So basically, current state, and like I said, this is a pretty quick changing topic, so this could be a bit stale. But basically, there's a heap of information, clickbait, putting out by news media. There's a range of stuff on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. You know, there's these too-minute experts that know everything about everything, and in amongst all of that, organisations are trying to work out how they can send everybody home but still maintain working environment. So it's pretty hectic out there, and a lot of misinformation. Just a couple of examples. So, you know, saying that the reporting is probably worse than the virus itself. People are getting stressed out, you know, selling miracle cures. people getting tasered over toilet paper. There's warnings. There's a list of scam treatments that have been issued takedowns. There's coronavirus-themed spam and malware. There's increasing campaigns with malware. Like I said, as the countries get more infections, and basically there's like a nationwide work from home, or almost a global work from home experiment that's happening at the moment. So a lot going on. So what does the future look like? So here's we get into a little disclaimer. This is basically my opinion of what could happen, and a little bit of a review on what has happened, and some ideas on how you can prepare to deal with this as it comes up from a cybersecurity point of view. Anything that's said tonight that could be interpreted as medical advice is not medical advice. I'm definitely not a medical professional. I'm not pretending to be one. If you think something sounds like medical advice, just ignore it and find your own thing. However, when it comes to cyber, it's my opinion, and I've at least got a little bit to back me up in this field that I can draw on and kind of at least have a fairly qualified stab in the dark, I suppose. Not a doctor. So I've got a bunch of scenarios of what's happening or what could happen. So the first one is obviously one is phishing. So there's a lot of phishing that's happening that's based on coronavirus. Most likely, this will continue, and it's a range of different levels. So there's some that just spray and pray. You look at it, it's just plain horrible, and it's rubbish from the get-go. It's that low-level stuff that's easy to pick up. But what we've noticed, and reports starting probably about a week ago, around the 11th of March, is that there's a lot more sophisticated actors that are now jumping on this, nation-states, APTs, things like that. And as the infection rate increases, people's concern increases, and people are more likely to click things. I don't know about you guys, but everyone's sending me emails saying, this is what we're doing for coronavirus, please read our attached announcement. And the volume of stuff is going to make it really hard for users to determine what's real and what's fake. So there's just a little screenshot there of one of the phishing emails. And if you look at that, that looks pretty legit. People are clicking on the links and getting malware.
You don't mind if I interject here, JP?
Yeah, sure.
Have you noticed that there is one big glaring neon sign that this is a fake? There's actually a spelling error.
Yeah, there was.
You'll always find at least one spelling error in these emails.
Yeah.
That's my experience anyway.
There's, like a lack of space and things like that, but it's still, for someone that's worried about it, they're kind of like wanting to suck up the information
and they're not going to pay attention to that.
That's right.
Before I only go to confirmed sources, I've actually been doing my own fight back against it over social media, so I've done a lot of correcting over the last few weeks.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
Yeah, well, that's my 10 cents worth anyway.
No, that's fine. So some ideas. If you've got the tools, you can use regex to capture coronavirus-like domains or like keywords like COVID and things like that, COVID-19. So you'll probably get a few false positives, but you can use that to tune out and see where other people in your organization are going, so that you can kind of try and identify trends. You can also, like Stacey said, educate your staff and family. So if you can, let your family know and everybody else that you work with that this is out there and it's a real threat. And whilst the health sides of this are important to be across, it's also important to keep an eye on the cyber as well. Automation can probably help you out as well. So if you have automated tools, then hopefully they can scale, and you won't have to have such a manual approach where you've got to sift through and pull stuff out. So yeah, scenario 1 was all about the phishing. Scenario 2 is USB. So you might wonder what this has to do with coronavirus. But you know, as organisations are trying to get all their staff working remotely as quickly as possible, and you see there's a spelling mistake there. So maybe don't click the link. So as people are trying to get out and have their staff working remotely, one option that staff may see is like, oh, I just put all those important files onto a USB stick so that I can work from home, plug it into my home PC. Even if you have staff that have laptops, like we were talking at the start, it might be that you know, there's a smaller screen, which is fine for a day or two, but you know, for 6 months, you probably want your big screens that you have at work. And if you don't have them at home, or sorry, if you do have them at home for your home PC, you may find that people are taking those USBs, putting sensitive information on them, and then plugging them into their computers at home, so they get the biggest screen. Also, they're then taking them back and forth between their work computer and their home PC. So you increase the chance of malware. You also increase the chance that that USB will be lost somewhere along the way. And if it's not encrypted, it could then that sensitive data could get leaked inadvertently. So a couple of things we can do to help out. Make sure that if anyone has files that they need to work on from home, that they're accessible through the VPN or other remote access that or remote storage that your organization uses. So if you have, you know, like a OneDrive or Dropbox type thing, make sure that staff know to use that rather than USB, so that's a bit more controlled. You can enforce like group policies so that you can actually lock down the USB port, so staff can't put a USB in to copy data onto. If you can't lock those down, you can monitor that through like a DLP, data leakage prevention control, that kind of thing. Give staff the opportunity to take monitors home so they don't have to transfer stuff to get the bigger screen. You know, oftentimes it's just as simple as having a cable to connect the laptop to their home monitor or something like that. So maybe encourage staff to take them home. Obviously, you want to track who's taking what where, so that it all comes back at the end of the day. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to go out and buy a whole lot of new stuff. And if there's an absolute need for USBs, make sure that they're encrypted. So if they are lost, that data on there isn't then available to whoever finds that USB at the park, at the shopping centre, the side of the road, wherever. Rightio, remote access. So we've seen some interesting remote access attacks recently around Citrix and Palo Alto and some of the other big players. So organizations will be expanding their remote access. They'll have a lot more users that are logging in. They may be deploying remote access where they haven't had it before, and if they do it too quickly, they may overlook or not bother to implement security controls, leaving holes that attackers can take advantage of. Bring your own device or BYOD could be a good option to enable a remote workforce. But again, you just need to have some thought about what that actually means and what controls you need. And you know, the chances are that your staff will start doing things differently. So you know, they're used to doing something in a physical environment that now they don't have access to, so they'll come up with unique ways to achieve the same result while they're working away from the office, and they won't always have security front of mind when they're doing that. You may also be deploying devices in a hurry. Maybe you deploy, I don't know, a day or something like that, and now that something ramped up to 100, you may have staff that are taking their desktops home, and they may have a different control set than the devices that your staff usually take home. So, a laptop build profile might be quite different to a PC that sits on a desk in a locked office with a security camera watching it and all that kind of thing. So you just need to think about if your organisation is going through and having people take home their desktops, you need to make sure that you have those controls in place the same as you do as if it was a laptop. So to help out, you want to make sure that all your remote services are well protected. So, just the basic stuff that people are recommending day in, day out. So your multi-factor, if you have a system that's accessible remotely, please put multi-factor on it. It's a really great way of reducing that risk for external threat actors to play with it. Make sure that management ports aren't opened up inadvertently, so you don't want admins or whatever opening up ports so that they can get back into the environment without it going through the proper controls, just because they need to do it in a hurry. Like, I've got to work from home tomorrow, I'm going to open up RDP on everything, so it's open to the world, but it means I can get in, but it also means that everyone else can as well. So make sure that it's a properly designed solution, and help them to deploy it in a hurry if it's what's needed, but help them deploy it securely in a hurry. Hopefully that still works, right? So look out for remote admin tools like TeamViewer and those kind of things. So people installing applications that'll then enable them to dial in externally outside of your normal organizational controls. You need to be keeping an eye out for things like that. So they may be looking to, have like a TeamViewer client that dials back out so that they can get in, but again, without the proper security controls, it also opens that up to a lot of other actors. So you want to make sure that your security policy, your current policy, is followed for remote access and opening up ports and services onto the internet. Make sure that your devices have host-based firewalls, disk encryption, all that kind of thing. Monitoring alerting. I thought I was on to the next slide. So make sure you set up some monitoring alerting around your remote access as well. Looking for geographically disparate logins. So somebody's logging in Queensland, but then 5 minutes later they're logging in from China or Japan or the US or something like that. It suggests that that's improbable. Also consider, if you can, alerting on people logging into your remote systems from outside of Australia. If you only have staff in Australia, with the lockdown on travel and a lot of countries closing their borders, essentially, it's pretty unlikely you're going to have staff trying to log in from overseas. Customers possibly more chance depending on your industry, but probably unlikely for your staff. So if you set up some alerting around logins from outside of Australia, then you might find you pick up a couple of things there. And also looking for password and authentication attacks on your perimeter and VPNs. All right, scenario 4. So more devices. So basically what we're talking about here is as the organisation tries to push towards a more mobile workforce and give them work from home capability, one option is to push more apps or functions to people's own devices. So maybe you're deploying a bunch of mobile devices, and if you don't have a solid practice around this, you can just amplify that attack surface. I think we've kind of talked about this, but staff directed to take home their desktops, which are built to operate in a corporate environment rather than outside that environment. And also, this is like doom and gloom. If things get super bad, you might find the traditional crime increase. And I actually read a report from the Netherlands who tracked this thing. I think they called it layoff crime or something along those lines, where as people lose work, they're more likely to turn to a life of crime to make ends meet. It might just be a small percentage, but it is still a chance as economic pressures. And you might find that you have organisation assets that aren't necessarily targeted as your organisation, but someone's just walking past and see through the window that you've got a PC or whatever, and they break into the house and steal it. And then through that, if it's not properly secured, they may have access to the data that's on it as they go through and try and get it into a state where they can sell it and make some money. So make sure that all your remote devices are well protected. So make sure they've got anti-malware and antivirus. Make sure that you got your host-based firewalls, especially on some of those things where you traditionally rely on the network-based firewall. Disk encryption for anything that's going outside. Use a mobile device manager, so a tool that will enforce policies on your mobile devices, that you can do remote wipes and things like that. Make sure that you've got monitoring alerting. So same as the slide before, you're looking at the geographical location of those logins, your password and authentication attacks, that kind of stuff. Scenario 5 is all about resources. So, maybe too many people in your organisation get sick and you're unable to maintain an appropriate level of security staff, and slowly things start to split. You might have things like patching that suffers that's being done at extended time frames, or maybe not at all. And this is especially important if you've got increased surface around your remote access, and if you're not keeping that up to date, threat actors will find a way in and into your system. Even things like certificates expiring can cause an issue. So I don't know if you guys remember or followed, but there was a point where the US government had a shutdown, and a lot of their sites, the certificate expired because they didn't have enough staff left to actually manage those processes. You'll end up, you'll have people off sick, which puts more work on the analysts that you do have. They get alert fatigue, and they may miss important indicators, just trying to keep up with everything as they go through. And also, at the moment, it's not like the normal level that you're seeing. It's an increase, especially around coronavirus and things like that. You also might find that other staff in your organisation might get bored of waiting on call. So if they ring the service desk and the service desk is stretched for resourcing, and there's a long wait time, and they're like ringing up to say, hey, I clicked on this funny thing and it did this thing or whatever. If they have to wait too long, they may just get sick and hang up and move on with their day, and you may miss that incident and that person reporting the incident. So it's important to make sure that you have channels that the incidents can come through in relation to security. It's a significant incident, so your organization's CERT team, so the Cyber Emergency Response Team or Computer Emergency Response Team, depending who you look to for a definition. That's your response team that's responding to that cyber incident. And if you don't have enough members, they'll struggle to respond effectively. You may find the incidents drag out longer, or are more successful, or get further. So tips around solving this. So if you got something that you can utilize automation with, then that's going to help you scale where possible and get through those extra alerts. Also separate staff that have key roles from each other. So, maybe split into teams and have your, A team and B team and have, a senior responder and a junior analyst and SOC engineer type thing on one team, and then have that mirrored across. So you've got another senior analyst, junior engineer on the other. If you have a small number of people that share similar roles, and this is true for other in your IT team as well. So let's say you have 2 network engineers. You want to make sure that they're not sitting next to each other in an office at the moment. Then one of them will work from home. If you've got that one guy that knows that legacy application, you kind of want to make sure that there's no major changes happening on that application, and that he or she stays nice and healthy and away from everybody else, perhaps. You want to make sure that your key critical processes are documented if you haven't already. So what this will help with is, if you've got those processes documented, then if you do have that resource shortage, you can bring in people from outside the organization or from other parts in the organization, and you can give them a process and say, hey, go and follow this thing. This is how we do it, and this is what you need to do. And it might make onboarding, extra resourcing a little bit easier if you're really short and need some extra help. Make sure that your team's rested wherever possible. So this is probably pretty hard at the moment if a lot of you are involved in scaling out your remote access operations and responding to, I guess, the influx of security questions and alerts and threats that are coming in around the coronavirus. So if you can, you probably want to keep your team rested because, generally speaking, if you're rested, you're less likely to get sick. And also, if somebody else in the team and your team starts dropping off, you want the remainder team not to already be burnt out. You want them to have something left in the tank so that they can step up and hopefully maintain an appropriate level. Make sure you give staff options to report security concerns. So if they've only got a phone number and they have to wait on that phone for an hour, they're probably not going to do it. So make sure that they know there's either an email address or somewhere they can log a web ticket, or who to ring, or if they can't get through on that line. Now's probably a good time to start engaging some of your trusted partners and planning for augmentation, capacity, and capability if needed. So, do you have organizations on hand that you can call on to provide extra resourcing if your resourcing is at a really critical shortness? I don't know if that makes sense. You know what I mean. If you're down to the bare minimum, have some plans on how you're going to support that, and maybe get an extra few people in to help you out. So a lot to think about. So scenario number 6 is bandwidth. So if people haven't worked from home before, maybe they don't know what kind of bandwidth they have. It's all right for us IT people. We know about the ups, and downs, and what how fast a megabit is compared to 100, and fiber to the node, and all of that kind of stuff. But for your average person, maybe they don't really get it. I had a questionnaire from the school asking, as they plan the kids to go remote, what kind of internet connection we had, and in brackets they've got FTTN/FTTP. And I'm like, well, I know what that means because I'm an IT guy, but I can bet you there's a large chunk of families out there that have no idea what that means. And let's spell it out. Let's make it easy for people. The concept of that was really good. They're trying to understand what the capability and capacity that people have at home. So if they do need to deliver classes remotely, how can they do it? using technical terms like that, I'm sure people will struggle with. So whilst we're trying to do all this in a hurry, you've got to make sure that the messages that you're communicating are clear and easy to understand by people that don't have an IT background, so they can provide the information that you want to help them out. It maybe you've got enough bandwidth to satisfy your Netflix addiction, and do a little bit of work here and there when the kids are at school. But do you have enough bandwidth at home that will support you working? Maybe your husband or your wife working, your partner, your kids, your housemates. If the kids are watching 3 different Netflix and you're trying to get some work done, is it enough? And then the other side of that as well, do you have enough bandwidth at the other end so that if you are getting people connected to your network over a VPN, do you have a big enough pipe back at the office to sustain the extra traffic that is going to be coming? So if people don't have enough bandwidth at home, this might make them try and think of other options. So, free wireless, maybe they're going down and they start parking outside Macca's or something like that to steal some wireless from them. Maybe they're switching to mobile data and, without realizing they're running up a huge bill either for themselves or the company. If you've got data caps within your organization that your staff don't know about, they're going to start burning through that, and you may end up with a very expensive bill at the end. So you might find that your connections for VPN and remote access, maybe 6 months ago they're at a fine level. You get to 80%, but that's okay. Whereas you're now shifting your whole workforce remote. Do you have enough capacity for that? Don't forget about licensing as well. That can kind of sneak up and get you. So if you're licensed for your VPN product for a number of users or concurrent connections, you might send your 1,000, 2,000 people home. But if you only normally got 200 people, you might only be licensed for 200 people, and the other 800, 1,800, whatever it is, might not be able to connect in purely because there's not a license free for it. So as more staff rely on the VPN and remote access and remote services, these services are going to become more and more critical to the organization and how it operates. So what this means is that your organization may become more susceptible to a denial of service attack. If you are already at capacity or close to, it's not going to take much more for that denial of service trigger to happen. So what can we do about it? Well, make sure you monitor and alert on your bandwidth usage. Understand that you may have new baselines for your bandwidth, so you may have to adjust those alerts. Whereas before, you might expect a certain volume of traffic that's probably going to increase. So you'll need to sort out the new baseline to alert on. Talk to your ISP, make sure you increase your bandwidth if you think that you need some, and think about the direction of the speed and bandwidth that you need, whether you need that upload or download. Think about the type of work that your remote workforce is going to be doing, how they're going to be connecting, and what side of that that you need the extra bandwidth on. Make sure that you talk to your mobile provider and understand your plans, your limits on those plans to try and avoid the bill shock. And you probably notice that some of the providers are now shifting to an unlimited plan for a short period of time to try and ease that and help out their customers, which is great. And understand how your VPN or your remote services are licensed, and look at increasing those licensing agreements so that you can cater for the number of remote workers. And if you can, and this is going to be a bit tricky, but if you can, try and increase the number of users working remotely kind of as slow as you can, so that as the volume increases, you can test out the bandwidth, see how it's performing, see if it matches with your estimates, and if there are any issues with the controls or the devices or anything like that, you've still got a few people on site that can help troubleshoot it before everyone's remote and no one's working on site, if that's what ends up happening. And implement denial of service protection for your VPN endpoints so that if you do have a denial of service attack, you are able to absorb that through some protection, and there's plenty of options out there. Number 7, video conferencing. So, like we are tonight, there will be a lot more video conferencing out there, and there are specific attacks against video conferencing, such as enumerating out meeting IDs. So what attackers can do is set up the script, and they'll just fire off and enumerate out that meeting ID, and then join these meetings randomly. And also if there's a large meeting, then those attackers kind of hide in the noise and participate. If the organisation has a solution that's unreliable or hard to use, hard to find information for, or only a certain number of people are licensed for, then staff will start moving to other solutions. They'll find their own way of doing it, whether it's in network or off network. So what we want to do to try and mitigate some of this is make sure that when you have a meeting, you're keeping an eye on who's actually in the meeting, which can be a bit hard if there's a lot of people, but you need to make sure that the people that you invite to the meeting are the people there and not random people from wherever are sitting there hiding. A couple of ways that you can do that is to put PIN numbers or things like that on your meetings. Make sure that you've talked to your provider about increasing licensing if you think there's going to be an increase in the number of people using your video conferencing solution. Make sure you're monitoring any file sharing capabilities these systems have so that you're not inadvertently transferring sensitive information out to home PCs or other third parties that you didn't mean it to get to. And like I said earlier, make sure that your sensitive meetings are password protected. Maybe if it's just you're having a chat about, I don't know what kind of coffee you're going to get in the canteen next year or something. That might not be so important if somebody eavesdrops that. Maybe it's not the end of the world. But if you're talking about critical things or things that are sensitive to the organisation, you want to make sure that you've got some protection around that. Make sure that any instructions on how to use video conferencing are easy for staff to get to, so that what you might find is that there's a lot more people using video conferencing that never have used it before. So, I think of the example of schools. So you've probably got a stack of teachers that don't traditionally deliver content online. I saw a tweet the other day that was basically saying, so my teacher that can't work out how to stop the YouTube autoplay from playing is going to be delivering content online now. This should be fun, or something along those lines. So if you can make it easy for your staff, there'll be a lot more success in using the tools and getting the value out of them. Having clear instructions that are readily available, maybe on an intranet or something like that, will be good to help ease them into the new meeting style. And that kind of leads into shadow IT. So shadow IT is basically where staff circumvent the controls that are in place, or go through and deploy systems without the knowledge of the IT department. So the procurement or use of systems outside IT approval policy. So if they can't do something that they normally do at the office, they'll find ways around so that they can do it out of the office. So if they have a tool that they use in the office that only works on the network, maybe they'll find a different tool or a different way of using it, which doesn't follow a good security practice, especially around things like collaboration, chat, video conferencing, file transfers, and things like that. Right? You can imagine, I just want to get this file to so and so. The VPN's too slow, so I'll just put it on my Dropbox and share it with them. And then they inadvertently share it to the whole world, and that sensitive information is then lost. Might also cause issues with billing. So you might find that if staff find a solution, it could be pretty successful. But maybe that's a good thing. You go, okay, we've got this new thing, and we're all doing this great work. It's making life easy. And maybe it's a free service that has a limited number of licenses, and the IT phone will get a ticket that says, "Hey, can I have another license for this thing?" And you go, "What thing?" It might be that one of the managers has put the purchase of the initial license on their corporate card, and as the service becomes more and more popular, they think 10 people are going to use it. All of a sudden, it's spreading throughout the organisation really successfully, but their credit card hits their limit, and they can't use it for the things that they're supposed to be using it with, because every month this chat bill is coming out or something like that. Or maybe it's a little bit more controlled, but that person leaves the organisation and forgets that this is on their card, and then all of a sudden no one knows who's paying for it, who the contact is, and how to get it going again. And you've got this tool that's part of the business and built into process that all of a sudden can't be used. So there's issues with success as well as the security side of things as well. So what we can do is monitor web applications. So a lot of IPS IDS will give you a breakdown of what applications you can monitor and block certain web categories. So there's a lot of tools out there that will block, collaboration and chat as a category, and then you can whitelist the organization approved service. You can also do that at a DNS level as well, something like OpenDNS, Umbrella, that kind of thing. You can block those categories. Also monitor your downloads. So here's where you can pick up people downloading these tools, install local clients and things like that. Application whitelisting is probably the simplest way for client-based stuff. So you have a list of applications that you're allowed to run in your network and on your endpoints, and if it's not on that list, it doesn't get installed. Scenario 9, social distancing. I hope you guys are doing all right. This is a bit different because I can't see you on space, so hopefully you're not all asleep. Void out of your brains. I've got no keys to judge from.
Interesting. You're doing fine.
I'm doing fine. Thanks, Ken. Scenario number 9, social distancing. So this has issues from a health and well-being perspective in terms of people being used to having contact with other people, but as people are quarantined, the risk of insider threats may rise. So they may feel that they're not being watched over as closely, perhaps, and maybe think that they can get away. And also, a lot of social engineering attacks like romance scams are successful because people are lonely and they want conversation. And we might see the same kind of thing happening here as people become socially isolated. They're looking for some of that conversation, and if a clever enough scammer can initiate that conversation, then it might be a risk, and they could get some sensitive information out of that person through from the company. The response team may find it hard working at a distance. So if you have a SOC or a security operations center where you've got a team of analysts working together, it's a very different environment to try and do that remotely. And think about what tools and things like that you can put in place to make that a bit easier. So a couple of tactics around this. So make sure that you do get FaceTime. So not necessarily Apple FaceTime, but where you're having conferences, at least once a day maybe. Make sure you're seeing the people. It's something that we've kind of introduced within our team, and I don't know what the other guys think, but I think it definitely makes a difference. Just kind of checking in and seeing everybody face to face at least once through the day if you're all spread out. Makes you remember that there are other people out there that you can talk to. So yeah, use your video as many times as you can, and you'll probably get used to having that video. I know it can feel awkward. Like I feel a bit awkward now, to be honest. But if you have that, you kind of get used to it, and it'll become the new norm. You can create social chat channels in your organisations, Slack or Teams or whatever. It's just specific to the chat on whatever. So you may have lots of conversations and it's all work related, but part of what people enjoy about going to work sometimes is just those random chats about random things like cats and the internet and stuff like that. So think about hosting a virtual coffee break where you can sit down and shoot the breeze for a small amount of time. It also gives you a good chance to check in with how everybody's going and make sure they're doing okay. Implementing data leakage controls and monitoring for that. Making sure too that you're alerting around that. So if people are sending information through social engineering attacks or scams, then you can either block or alert on that to stop that from there. Right, yeah, I can see we've got a couple of comments popping up. Sorry, I've just noticed them. Colin's wanting to annotate. All right, you want to draw a picture, Colin, or you hit the wrong button?
Click. I figure out how to write comments.
All right. Ben, I think everyone can see the chat, right? Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'll move on. Sorry, I got distracted there. Something popped up on the screen. But I think if everyone can go, like you guys can see the chat. Keep going. Gotta re-click back in here. The other thing as well is monitoring alert on access, especially privileged accounts and critical systems. So make sure you know who's logging into what and when. Like I said, if there's not somebody sitting over your shoulder, you might feel more inclined to maybe steal some company secrets or something like that because no one's watching. Make sure that you do drill the incident response team whilst some or all of the team are remote. And hindsight's a great thing. If you've done this in the past, then it makes it easier when you have to do it in the future. If you haven't done it before, now's probably a good time to do a couple of drills while everyone's remote. Check out the tools that you have for collaboration and chat, and make sure that they kind of work and that you're getting the people working and looking at the same things but not the same items at the same time, if you know what I mean. And that have all your analysts looking at one ticket, and everything's all kind of covered out. Rightio. Scenario number 10, economic. So, organisations may be impacted financially. I think that's a pretty well good guess. Looking at some of the stuff that's happening, so with the travel restrictions and people being quarantined or distanced, you may find that you don't have enough staff to do the things that your business needs to do to turn a profit, or you might not have enough customers. So if you're a shop where people are coming in, then it's kind of hard if everyone's quarantined and you're getting no one through the door. So it could cause a few issues. If you don't have staff, you may find that contracts that you have could pass. So if you've got a contract with a company that's doing security monitoring for you, and no one bothers to renew that contract, and then all of a sudden no one's doing monitoring. You could have your domains expire if no one's renewing the bills, if there's stale DNS and things like that, other people can take over your domains if you let them lapse. You might not be able to pay your staff, and that'll cause a talent drain. So maybe you've got a gun team, but you just don't have the money coming through the door to keep them on, and they're going to find jobs elsewhere. Then when this is all over and done with, and your customers start coming back and you start turning a profit, you might find that you don't actually have any good staff, and you have to start over. Worst case, you may go out of business, but you may do that quickly and don't get a chance to turn off services. So, maybe you had some foresight and turned on, kind of like prepaid for 12 months for your web hosting, something like that. And you go out of business, your website's still there, but no one's looking at the alerts that are coming through and keeping it patched and up to date. And maybe it's still attached to the S3 bucket that's got all your customer details in, and there's no one to contact to talk to about it, and over time attackers could get that. If you got staff that are worried about job security, they may be more inclined to sell company secrets to get a little bit of extra cash. Again, it probably depends on the organisation that you work in, but that's definitely something to think about. I've lost my little clicker. There we go. So if you can, pay for these services in advance for as long as it makes sense, and they'll try and protect from to keep them going in contract lapses and things like that. Automate things like certificate, domain renewals where you can, and then you don't have to have a person there to renew. It just happens, right? It also means that the staff have more time to do more value-add stuff. But also make sure that your staff know that these things still are important. If your customers are coming to a site and getting a certificate error, or the app's broken because the certificate hasn't been renewed, that's going to have a negative customer impact, and maybe they start assuming the worst, even that you're gone out of business, even though that's not the case. Make sure that you maintain your relationships with suppliers, but also keep an eye on them, and if they're struggling to maintain their business as well, make sure that you're managing that third-party risk and looking for that changing landscape as well. Physical security. So, as staff are increasingly working from home, you've got a lot more assets that are outside of the office, and a lot of people, their home environment might not be as secure as their work environment. home assistance as well. So, these things listen to you, even when you don't say the activation phrase sometimes. So maybe mute the microphone or turn them off when you're doing work or on a conference call or something like that, so that you don't have people inadvertently listening in. Make sure that guests and family don't access your work data. Also, the offices that are back, and empty, might become large targets for vandals or theft, as not much is around. So, just make sure your staff have clear guidelines and understand the physical security of the work assets, what's required. Make sure that drive encryption and passwords are used to keep information safe if it is stolen. Geographic monitoring, we've already talked about. Remote wipe capability, so if something is stolen, you're able to erase it securely, take all that company data off it, and then you take the loss, but at least it's not the data as well. So MDM can help with this, and tracking the location of phones and things like that. If you've got CCTV, have a think about whether this is something that's remotely accessible, or does somebody have to be in the office to see what's going on. You might want to increase your monitoring around door access logs. So if you've got swipe cards to get into the building, having those feeding into your theme or something like that, where you can trigger alerts. Because if everybody's working from home, there shouldn't be anybody going into the office or the data center. Make sure that anything that is left behind is appropriately secured. You might want to put on security guards or things like that to help bolster that security and reduce that risk. And any smart assistants that you have near your workspace, if you mute the mic while you're on or talking about work, it's probably a good idea. And make sure that your staff know that it's unacceptable for their family to use their work assets, or maybe if that's a risk that you're happy to take, then let them know that as well, that their kids can use the work laptop for school or something along those lines. And then any guests or anything like that, try and make sure that they're not overlooking your screens and things like that. Alrighty, there's a lot of stuff going on around this. We're up to number 12. We're getting through it. So critical services, and this is one of the ones I put in there, and I went, hopefully this doesn't happen, but since I've written this and finished it, there's been some examples. So hospitals and other critical services are going to be pretty overwhelmed responding to the health crisis, and any cyber attack could have a huge impact on that effort. So, imagine that a hospital gets ransomware just as the virus starts to peak within their local community, and then they can't serve patients, treat patients. It's going to make it more likely that they'll pay a ransom, and it's more likely if it was a higher ransom that they'd pay it as well, because they want to ease that pressure pretty quick if they've got patients lined up out the door. So for this one, the day after I wrote this, I saw something in the news, and there's been a couple since. So there was a hospital, Czech hospital, that had an attack that basically took their systems offline, and all the hospital staff lost their computer systems while they had queues of people waiting to be treated or tested for coronavirus. And it just caused mayhem in the hospital by all accounts. Fake news and fake queues is something else that you need to be aware of. So, another cyber attack on the US health, the governing body, and there's some fake text messages that were sent out saying that that everybody was going to be quarantined within a certain amount of, a day or two, and it ended up in basically the I think it was the NSA or something like that, putting out a Twitter saying it's fake, don't worry about it. Go here and look for the latest advice. So make sure that there's people out there that are looking to disrupt political, discredit political leaders or political initiatives. They want to create confusion in communities. This gives them the opportunity to have a better chance that any cyber attacks they take out will be successful. We're also seeing an increase in email and phone scams, which include fake queues, tax refunds, things like that. So here's one. You've received a new message, blah, 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 go here. And then, that's a scam that Stay Smart Online notified about. But, you can imagine if you're really concerned about coronavirus, you're much more likely to click that link and go through and get taken advantage of. So what can we do? Well, encourage users to get their information from reputable sources. So maybe make sure that you've got who.int is the official site for the World Health Organization. Publish the official Queensland Health and Federal Health sites and some other good sources, and give those to your staff to look at for unbiased, factual, unsensationalized information. So then that enables them to make better decisions. You can block IPs and URLs associated with these spam messages. So if you're seeing them coming across your environment, you can block them straight away. Rule number one of the internet is don't believe everything on the internet. Make sure that you're reinforcing this message and showing your staff that some of this is crazy. All right, and now for something completely different, and by completely different, probably a little bit more cheery and news. So another scenario is that the crims get sick. So the people that are doing these attacks and causing confusion and fake news and all this, maybe they're getting sick. So they experience disruptions in their operation, and maybe the level of spam we'll see will start to drop off. I'm not seeing any evidence of that at the moment, but maybe we can hope. So maybe the gangs get a bit smaller. Travel restrictions mean maybe they can't meet up as much, and they'll have the same issues that we do. So maybe there's criminal gangs that are getting together, talking about how they can collaborate and get work done virtually rather than in the big old abandoned warehouse or whatever. Also, there's a silver lining, and this will tie in a little bit later. It means that more conferences and meetups are going to shift to online platforms. It means you have more chance to attend these because you don't have to worry about paying for travel or accommodation. You can maybe attend conferences that overseas or interstate, you might have to just put up with the time zone. But it gives you some opportunities there to increase your conference attendance and your knowledge around InfoSec. So I've got a couple of links up there, and we can share this around. So keep an eye on that. There might be some cool stuff that we get that you can attend from there. Alrighty, so unfortunately no pizza tonight, but we will take a quick break. I think maybe somewhere 15 minutes, half an hour. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to get hungry. I say good day to the kids. So feel free to take yourselves off mute and chat out loud or in the chat room. I can see there's a bit of a conversation going through there. But yeah, also take the opportunity to grab something to eat, have your dinner, and then have a general chat while we have dinner. After the break, I've tried to come up with a workshop that's going to work virtually for us. That's kind of related on this theme. But just want to say thanks to Dan, although he hasn't got us pizza tonight. He's certainly helped out in providing the video conferencing tool that we use tonight. So thanks, mate. And on that note, I'll leave you guys to it for a bit. So yeah, like I said, grab something to eat. Feel free to swing back, and let's say we'll aim to kick off maybe around the 7:15 mark, and go through the workshop. But in between times, we'll chat.